Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. Just want to talk a bit more about the Julian Assange story. I suppose that's the proper thing for it, and I'm not really convinced which way around it is, whether this is just a smokescreen or whether this is a genuine thing, because these days you don't know, what's the setup and what's not, and we assume that what we see on the news is genuine, when they present this Julian Assange character and what he's done and he's locked away and all that, and we assume that that's true, and then when he gets arrested, we're all up in arms, but we've forgotten to think, well, wait a minute, we don't even know whether the very beginning of the story was even true. Is it just a smokescreen so that they can bring out when they want to distract from things, such as Brexit in this case, or, to tell other stories or to tighten other bits of laws that they wouldn't be able to do unless they have a certain event take place. This kind of thing you can see in, if you've ever read George Orwell's Animal Farm, you can see examples of where that is created. So I don't even know whether he is a genuine person in the sense of the story that's being told, whether the WikiLeaks thing is true, whether it was him who did it, and Chelsea Manning, etc., or whether this is just a generated story to keep us distracted, because a lot of what we go through in life is a distraction to keep us from concentrating on actual life and the things that we should be concentrating on, which is us as a people and our society and everyone suffering and sorting those things out. But we're distracted by competitions, by sports, by, if you think about it, if you ask most people when they're not at work, I mean, that's the biggest distraction, is keeping everyone working 5 days a week, and then the 2 days they give them off. One day people are probably watching football matches, which is a generated thing to keep you into locking into your team and supporting that team and having fights about it and arguing about it and supporting it, being patriotic, and all that kind of thing for your team. It's all a big distraction. It's not as, if you actually, I was thinking about this before, and I will get back to Julian Assange in a second, but I was thinking about this before. If you actually stripped away the distractions from your life, if you just, you stripped away television, social media, your mobile phone, the football match or the team that you support, the sports activities that you do, all the things that are, peripheral, maybe some might say frivolous, all those extra things. If you take them away, what actually do you have? What is it stopping you from thinking about? Is that what life is about? Were you born? Is this, I mean, especially those people who claim to be religious, which is majority of people do make that claim. Were you born to sit and spend most of your time watching television or playing on your phone or liking people's pictures on Instagram or, going to work for a business, so that they can make 300 different variants of whatever to compete against another company doing exactly the same thing? Is that what we were born for? Is it? I mean, if that's the case, because that's what most of us spend our lives doing, isn't it? Most of us, if you could actually detail, your life at this stage of whatever age you are, if you actually had that facility, which we don't, most of us, and that's why we don't see it. But if you did actually take, say, maybe 1 year or even 1 month, or I suppose like 1 week of your life, if you just took 1 week of your life and you wrote down you've got 24 hours, so if you write down 24 hours, 1 week, and you actually plotted what you did for that 1 week and those 24 hours, I think you'd be shocked and horrified. And then you times that by the amount of years that you're living, the amount of wastage that you as an individual are doing and us as a people, as a species are doing. Wasting our time whilst pretending that we're not wasting our time, that it's really important that we go and support football teams, that we watch television, that we watch Game of Thrones or Doctor Who or Keep Up the Kardashians or whatever it is, or, we we support Brexit, or politicians, or they're fighting for each other to keep borders and keep people out and this, that and the other, and commerce, and that's really what that's all about. We've really lost sight of what life is really meant to be about. I think there's an unresounding yes is the case, actually. We have lost sight, or each one of us, because we're replicants of the system, like I've mentioned this before, that we're just, we don't realise we're doing it. But the problem is, even when we do realise we do it, we still carry on, as I'm about to do here in a hypocritical way. So this is the breaking news that unfortunately, the one I talked about previously when I was talking about Julian Assange, I was unable to record it, or I didn't record it. It was on Sky News. It was a really good interview. They were challenging the presenter, and the presenter wasn't really, was talking over them, and I've already mentioned that. Here's another one. That I just want to, it doesn't really matter about the Julian Assange case, but what I want to show you is the how you're being led a message by the TV, because that's where you're getting all this from, where I'm getting all this from, and we're taking it for granted that they tell the truth. And you can see how these things are engineered by the way they use words, what words they say, how they treat their panelists. A lot of the time they make sure they get the panelists that will agree with whatever argument. They know what they're going to say before they even say it, because they want to project a certain thing. And this isn't some kind of cabal conspiracy and something like that. This is just how journalism in general works. Everyone knows about that, surely. So it's just interesting and there's another one I'm going to play afterwards. So let's just see what we see. Hopefully it'll be loud enough this time.
Not prosecuting. So I think there's funny businesses being going on.
What are you suggesting? What are you alleging?
What I'm suggesting is that there wasn't a desire. I've been quite clear. I was being very clear that if the prosecutors aren't prepared to prosecute, why would we take that prosecution or the allegation seriously? The Swedish prosecutor wouldn't come to London to interview Julian, which they're quite happy to do. No. And in addition to that, there was no desire to prosecute. The La Repubblica, an Italian newspaper, you can look this up, did a Freedom of Information request in Sweden and was able to retrieve emails that the Crown Prosecution Service had destroyed, which discouraged the Swedes from acting. Anyway, they've dropped that. I mean, what's happening now is nothing to do with Sweden.
Okay, so it is, you are suggesting everything to do with WikiLeaks in the United States. Why do you feel that he doesn't have a case to answer?
No, I'm not saying that there's no... What do you mean, about the Swedish stuff or the American stuff?
No, the American stuff.
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, there's an indictment that was published, and they wish to extradite him. Now, whether... I'm not sure that people in this country are necessarily happy to see an extradition on this basis. This is really, spiteful, self-interested politics. I mean, yes, we should be fine extraditing murderers and people who are bank robbers and people like that. But this is about Julian revealing the truth about a foreign government, uncomfortable truths about the foreign government. This is a completely different thing. This is really a vendetta. It's revenge by the Americans on Julian. They want to set an example of him. And, we all really know that.
But the allegation is not about publishing these WikiLeaks, though, is it? It's more to do with conspiracy with Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning, to commit computer intrusion to hack government servers. Is that not your understanding?
I think what they have done, and that is what it reads like. They've been struggling to find something they can get him on, but it's not really to do about that. It's to set an example of him. What the Russians do is they kill people in Salisbury, and what the Americans want to do in this instance to discourage other people from revealing information that's uncomfortable to them, the truth. And this is what they do. They want to put him in jail for the rest of his life.
Yeah, it might be uncomfortable, but it's potentially also illegal if he did conspire to commit computer intrusion to hack government servers. That's illegal.
They will have to prove that. But I've just said I don't believe that's what it's about.
They have to prove it in a court of law, and in order to do that, he needs to face those allegations, doesn't he?
This is Vaughan Smith, by the way. He's a friend of Julian Assange. Listen to how she inflects her voice. Now, why, the interesting thing about journalists is how they're very pro-government, whatever the message is, I don't know, how do they make these people turn into so pro-government? I can't imagine if I was a journalist, I would last very long, because I just wouldn't be able to, especially if why are you arguing for an entity that most times doesn't help you out? Or maybe she's helped out because she's got this great job at Sky News. This is Kate Burley, by the way. But it is interesting, you hear how she's speaking, how she's using her voice to sort of make out that this guy is like crazy. Why, you I mean, we all know the truth, yes. They're trying to get through a technicality. It's not, they don't care about the truth being published, but they care about the fact that it was hacked. Well, the thing is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you attained the information. If the information details something bad against the people who put governments in, remember they are people as well, then it doesn't matter by what means you get it. The truth is the truth. And this, because you sign a piece of paper and because governments say that, oh no, you shouldn't do this, that and the other, that doesn't stand up.
I don't believe so. I don't think we should be so gullible. Look, the reason people like me stand behind Julian Assange is because at the heart of it, WikiLeaks was a project that says in a free democracy that people have the right to information about how ruling elite acts and behave. Julian threatened the most powerful people in the world with exposure. Ordinary people who, thanks to Julian and WikiLeaks, ordinary people now understand a lot more about the cynicism and corruption.
But it's about how you access that information, surely.
All right, well, look, this thing goes back to the Afghan war logs and the diplomatic cables 8 years ago. 8 to 10 years ago. And now it's quite clear that while this has been going on, Obama thought, okay, this probably doesn't stand up. He's a publisher, and decided not to do it and let Chelsea Manning out of jail after 4 years. Chelsea Manning is now back in jail. Clearly what Trump wants is a sort of a trophy show trial before 2020 election.
You can't hack government servers or conspire with someone else to commit...
Hang on, this is our government.
Finish my question and then you can answer it. Is that possible? You cannot. It is illegal. Thank you. It is illegal to hack government servers or to conspire with someone else in order to do that. That is illegal. So that is the charge that is likely to be.
Hang on. You're talking about something that needs to be tested in the courts, frankly.
Of course.
You sound like the American government is our government. It's not our government. This is a foreign government. It's a foreign state. I mean, if it was Russia, if Julian had maybe...
But it's not Russia.
But it doesn't matter. It's America. It's a foreign state. We seem to act as if America has the right to pull people from our country just because they don't like them. And you're talking... if there's a certainty...
No, but they have an ability to ask our government to extradite somebody that they feel needs to answer these allegations in a court of law. That's what America is asking us to do.
Would we pull somebody out of an embassy who's got asylum for the Russian government or just the American government?
Surely that's a nebulous argument.
Why?
Because the American government have asked us specifically whether we can provide information provide this gentleman to them via video link to see whether there is a case to answer. Why is that not acceptable?
It's not acceptable because we know what's going on here. It's not acceptable because we wouldn't do it for other governments. We have extremely weak extradition laws with the United States of America. Julian has been in all the supernatural bodies. For example, the intra-American Court of Human Rights has judged in his favor that he was he received asylum, should have been entitled to it. Ecuador has been pressured by the Americans and us, simply to do America's bidding. I think Julian is somebody who has brought forward whole debate about transparency in a way that was incredibly important. I know he needs to be able to participate in that. And this is just bullying. This is sort of victimizing him. This is taking out on Julian, and because he's threatened the most powerful people with the world with exposure. He must not be extradited to the United States. It would be absolutely scandalous if that happened.
And he's potentially done that allegedly illegally. We'll find out what the courts say in more detail on the 2nd of May when he has to appear via video link in front of a judge in the United States. For now, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Back to Brexit, though, in just a moment.
Right, so A few things. So the first interesting thing is the fact that I don't know, has this ever happened that a person has had to appear via video link? So wait a minute. So that he's going to sit, I suspect, in a UK court, and he's going to be connected to a video camera, and the prosecuting judge will be in the United States. Would that ever happen anywhere else? That kind of thing. Has it ever happened? I mean, it seems very... And the other thing is that the interesting thing about all this is, what has this man done? He was accused of doing. He's hacking, and obviously governments and laws. There's written down a piece of paper that we all have to follow, and this, that, and the other, of hacking is a bad thing, and this, that, and. But if it was found out, I mean, are you telling me the United Kingdom and the United States of America do not participate in hacking? You do not think that they try to hack into Russian, into Chinese, into Iran, into Iraq, into Afghanistan? You don't think they're doing those types of things? So it's one rule for one, another for individuals. It would be naive to believe that that is not that is not happening. And I'm sure there's probably evidence of this from the past where they've hacked into things, because you do remember this thing of spies. Spies, which is basically hacking, is where individuals would pretend and go into the countries and get information. You could say that's illegal, but it's still done by every country on the planet, isn't it? But it's not allowed for individuals to do it on their own against a government. That's the problem that they have. And the other thing is that it'd be interesting if Kay Burley was to use her argument that she used against Julian Assange, a man who all he's done is stolen bits of zeros and ones, against someone like Tony Blair or George W. Bush, who, we all know Kofi Annan, after he left the United Nations, said that the war was illegal. Everyone knows it was illegal, that it was regime change, which is illegal against international law and was not... and Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. The data was made up so that they could fool them into making that decision and using a clause in the United Nations to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. Everyone knows about that. Now, they have the responsibility, because they're the world leaders and that's how this world works, that we put them in and they make these difficult decisions and they stand by them. And how many people died because of this illegal war, both British or American or Canadian or Iraqi or Afghanistan or Middle Eastern or wherever they were all from, in this illegal war? How many people died? That's people who died, not zeros and ones, not data. I don't see them being hurled out of their homes. I don't see them being put in front of cameras to be, to the Hague, to be crimes against humanity. None of that's happening, and I'm sure if Kay Burley was put to that argument, she wouldn't be arguing the same argument that she argued against Julian Assange, that he did an illegal thing and he should face trial for that. Well, what about the illegal thing that George W. Bush and Tony Blair did? Oh, it was whitewashed, wasn't it? But you just see how, and they're saying, there's another bit you're going to see where there's a Labour person saying about how, we should treat individuals the same. But, we all know that is not the case. That does not happen. We do not treat individuals the same. Because if that was the case, then Tony Blair and George W. Bush would be up in the Hague or in prison by now, or hung like they did to Saddam, allowed to happen to Saddam Hussein. So now we're going to go to Sky News. That was yesterday that you heard. This is today now, and there's I don't know if it's going to come up this beginning bit, but I think it was a Labour MPs talking about it. But it was interesting how they were arguing it.
Would be arrested, unlike America, where he is wanted for leaking classified information. In the letter, the politicians say this would be so the formal investigation into an allegation of rape can be concluded, and if appropriate, a charge can be made and any trial can take place. We do not presume guilt, of course, but we believe due process should be followed and the complainant should see justice be done. Okay, let's talk to our political reporter Rob Powell, who's in Westminster. Rob, why have they written this letter?
So I think what they're attempting to do is trying to get in early and put pressure on Sajid Javid to prioritise any extradition request from Sweden over the request that's already in from the USA on those computer hacking charges. Now, as you say, Sweden hasn't yet made an extradition request. At the moment, we understand Swedish prosecutors are deciding, looking into whether they want to revive this investigation into these 2010 rape allegations. Now, if they decide to, that could lead to a request for Mr. Assange to come over to the country to face those charges. Now, this all relates to allegations dating back to 2010. Julian Assange denies them. He says it was consensual sex. He also suggests that there may have been some political angle or motivation to these allegations relating to his website WikiLeaks and the documents he'd published, confidential documents about the US government and the US Army. That was the reason why he went into the Ecuadorian embassy and was granted asylum 7 years ago. Of course, he's now been removed from that. That happened on Thursday. You can see the pictures here now. And I think what these some 70 MPs and lords and peers, mainly Labour, but from across all the parties, are trying to do is turn the spotlight away from the US allegations of computer hacking and onto these rape allegations. Now, in doing so, I think they're potentially risking some sort of tension within their own Labour Party. Now, since that arrest on Thursday, the front bench, or members of the front bench of the Labour Party, and Jeremy Corbyn, have been quite supportive of Julian Assange, saying that he shouldn't be extradited to the USA, and essentially praising him for the work he had done, exposing atrocities carried out by troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, that drew criticism from backbenchers in the party who said that they should be focusing on these rape allegations. Now also we have the shadow foreign secretary, someone that sits around that Labour top team, Emily Thornberry, saying that she was disgusted that the allegations from America had somewhat eclipsed what had apparently happened in Sweden. She's also tweeted this afternoon saying, why weren't Swedish authorities told in advance of Assange's ejection from the Ecuadorian embassy, as the US clearly was? Our priority should be the two alleged victims of sexual violence in Sweden and not a ruse to get him extradited to the US as a whistleblower. Now, why this does matter is because the one allegation of rape that is remaining, the others have already expired, have gone past the time limit, that expires in August next year. So I think the concern of MPs is that if Julian Assange is taken to the US first, that allegation might run out of time and the victim may not see the judicial process carried through in Sweden. That's why they're trying to turn the spotlight onto these Swedish allegations in this letter to the Home Secretary today.
Okay, Rob, thank you so much. And in the next couple of minutes, we're going to be talking to one of the signatories of that letter, Catherine West, in a couple of minutes. Let's move on now.
Although a lot of that was assumption, because they don't know why the Labour are doing. I don't think Labour really, are they really concerned? Maybe some people are concerned about the rape charge, but I'm sure that most of it is to do with that they don't want Julian Assange to go to the United States. But no matter what, it's assumption, and that's the problem with a lot of the journalism on these programs. Is a lot of it is assumption. They don't know how are they making spurious claims of what people are doing and why they're doing it. They did the same with Brexit, why people voted for Brexit, when they've got no way of really qualifying that. Right, let's find this other bit. Where is it? I'm going to find it now. It's an advert, just in case you're wondering.
We're happy to.
More now, as MPs are urging the government to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to Sweden. The Australian is facing allegations of rape there, and they expire next August. Well, Labour's Catherine West joins me now from North London. She was one of the signatories on that letter sent to the Home Secretary asking for his extradition. Miss West, thanks so much for joining us. Why did you sign that letter?
Well, I feel it's really important to take a stand. Of course, Mr. Assange has unearthed really important things that we as citizens need to know, but there is a fundamental issue here about those allegations of sexual assault. And I think, and as do many, many women MPs, including Stella Creasy, who was the lead signature on this letter, to bring it to the attention of the Home Secretary that he must take those allegations seriously, and that we would like the Home Secretary to work very closely with Sweden, as we always do through the European Union with our reciprocal arrangements on extradition, to ensure that Mr. Assange does face any charges which are made against him.
Do you think that in all of this, the US allegations have eclipsed the allegations in Sweden?
Well, I think in a way, I guess it's about an individual can be a good person and a bad person. We don't know. The point is that the rule of law must apply. And whether it's the rule of law applying on the WikiLeaks allegations, whether it's the rule of law applying on the sexual assault allegations, the important thing is that our Home Secretary must take action to ensure that both of those are heard equally, because they both matter.
Why the Home Secretary? We've spoken to an extradition lawyer who says basically there isn't actually a legal mechanism through which Mr. Javid could block the extradition. So why don't you leave it up to the courts? Do you have faith in the justice system here?
I think it is really important to leave it up to the courts, but I also think that you can't just take all the politics out of this. So in both cases, it's really important that the government is proactive. And also we know that it was the government who was active in terms of the relationship with Ecuador to have Mr. Assange coming out from the embassy. The other thing I would add is that Mr. Assange himself did look as though he might be suffering from mental health. And I would say that it's really important that he is treated as somebody who may be suffering from poor mental health. So all through this, that he also be treated in a humane way.
Let's talk about politics, because a lot of people argue that those allegations in Sweden were just a ruse to get him eventually extradited to the US.
Well, I think all that will come out in the course of those our allegations, which they currently just are allegations, but they will, if the procedures work with Sweden and the UK, then eventually that will all come out, and therefore there's nothing for Mr. Assange to be frightened of if there is nothing in it. It's more that obviously anyone, regardless of who they are, even if they're very important publishers, journalists or hackers, that they are also held to account in the same way any other man on the street would be held to account for sexual assault allegations.
So do you think that the Swedish allegations should take precedence over the US ones?
Well, not necessarily. Obviously, the way these things work, both processes could possibly happen at the same time. What we do know, though, is that with the Swedish allegations, that they are time limited and that they expire to some degree by 2020. So it would be logical to have those heard first, and then the other more complex investigations to take place later, and that way we would be able to hear both things. I guess the risk would be that if the US process began, it may be so it may take so much time and energy and so on that then the Swedish allegations were not heard. So that's why we've signed the letter today, to raise the case and to raise its profile so that the time is considered very quickly, so that 2020 doesn't expire too soon.
I mean, given how the US has reacted in all of this, do you think that they would accept for Mr. Assange to be taken to Sweden to answer those allegations?
Well, I'm not sure at what level it is within the US. I assume it's very sort of high profile now, even though Mr. Trump seems to have changed his mind, doesn't he? He previously enjoyed the WikiLeaks allegations when it was something that might help him in an election, and now he's not so sure. I guess the important thing is that the courts have this opportunity now, but that all through this process that Mr. Assange be treated in a humane way as somebody who is potentially suffering from poor mental health, but also that we do get to the bottom of both sets of allegations.
Does your entire party feel the same way as you do?
Stupid question.
I think everybody wants to see the rule of law upheld. That's why we live in a democracy. That's why we're very proud of our legal institutions and the rule of law. In lots of other countries, people would get away with lots of different things. In our system, we do have these relationships with other legal systems, and it's very important that they be allowed to run their course. And I'm a big believer that if somebody can be doing very good things, but they can also be doing very bad things. But in the end, it is the courts which will find that out. And I'm very pleased now that we have an opportunity now to hear both of those cases, but that particularly the letter which I've signed does highlight the fact that I think for a lot of people they've felt that Mr. Assange has been dodging those allegations and being held to account, and we're very pleased as women MPs that he will be held to account eventually, and we want the Home Secretary to do all he can in his power to make sure that that happens.
What do you make of Mr. Corbyn saying that we shouldn't extradite him to the US?
Well, I think he's making a very important point about freedom of speech and about the importance of governments which do things which citizens don't know about. And we know that through the Paradise Papers, through WikiLeaks, through a number of other big sort of hacking scandals, if you like, we have learned a lot about the way that governments work. And we have to be really careful that that governments do not tell untruths to their citizens, that they do not cover up war crimes, that they do not cover up or alleged war crimes, that they act in honesty with citizens. But I also think it's really important that we allow the rule of law to look at any allegations, because I do believe that our courts will find the correct justice for individuals, and I do think that the rule of law in both of these cases will be upheld.
Okay, Ms. West, thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon.
Kimberly, all the best.
It just it's just beggars belief. I mean, I don't understand. Is this lady, and politicians generally say the same thing, are they really this naive? Really? Do they believe it? Like she said, Julian Assange, he would have nothing to worry about. Wait a minute. Have you never seen any films? Have you never even looked through real events where there's been cases where it's been fixed? You know, does she not realise that if these allegations of rape, which was maybe a ruse, like they say, to be able to extradite Julian Assange to America because he disclosed truths about the government's actions, if it was the American government that found someone who had sex with Julian Assange, or maybe made sure that it happened, how would they? You don't think they would have like evidence, and how is the evidence? You know, when he faces trial, it's going to be a person versus a person, isn't it? I'm sure there's no actual physical evidence, is there, to show that he raped her. I'm assuming that there's no material or no medical information that would be able to verify that kind of thing. So it's basically going to be one person against another. If this person is lying, which is what the claim was, why would you think that Julian Assange would be safe? This person could be a CIA agent who would be able to argue much better than Julian Assange. That person would be trained. And what's this idea of, you know, because she's talking about war crimes, this, that and the other. She's Labour. Well, why doesn't she hand in Tony Blair to face his war crimes trial? And when she talks about what the American government has done, does she not realise that probably and almost certainly the UK government has done very bad things as well that its citizens doesn't know about? Is she really blind to think that governments tell the truth to their citizens all the time? Of course they don't. Oh, come on. How many of these scandals do we, keep getting revealed every year, all the time, about the interests that governments have in other countries and the things they do, and then they come out? I mean, some of them are not allowed to be reported for 60 years or ever. Oh, come on, are you just pretending to us, or is it just because you know that the people listening to it are so sheep-like, so stupid, they won't even question it because they're just going to believe you word for word, and then the media is going to acknowledge you, and then we're all going to just believe? I hope that age has gone now, that age of belief, and now that we're in an age of discernment where we actually... I mean, maybe we should just switch off the TV and stop listening to these people, because they're the ones that are architecting the story of our lives, of our existence, of truths and untruths. But it just seems like so naive, the fact that if he's been set up, it would be very difficult for him to face a fair trial. Because if he's been set up, do you think that if governments are able to do bad things, yeah, like war crimes, like the things that the soldiers did, the things that the government made up facts so that they could go and invade a country, so they could take their oil, so they could take their property, they could make claims that they would make the country better and give it democracy, and it's worse, and they put in puppet dictators, and all these things that's happened throughout our history. You then don't think that they would be able to also control the governments, the police and the judges? Have you never seen all these whitewashes of the Iraq-Afghanistan war that have come out from judges that exonerate everyone or lay blame but don't actually do anything about it? So how do you believe there's going to be any fairness in this? Because if you're saying that individuals can do corrupt things and get away with it, well, you don't know where they are then, because that's in the nature in every single one of us. You're believing that the law is this great thing that's fair, but how many people have been put in prison that were not guilty? Whose fault was that? That's the judges and the prosecutors and the people involved in the trials. Come on, it's the naivety of what some people talk about, as if they see, the government or the judges or the law or all these things through these glasses that make everything look so spectacular and perfect, whereas it's far from it. Is corrupt and unjust. I don't know. I know. It just amazses me. No matter what story you listen to, the amount of rubbish that people can spout, and unfortunately, probably the worst thing is believing it to be true, or they're just trying to persuade us to believe in the fact that, yes, we can trust the law. It doesn't matter. Yes, America's invaded countries and killed lots of people, and so has the UK, and people have, like Oscar Wilde and all sorts of other people have been found guilty of things, and, they've been put in prison because of the mindset of the people in charge, and all these different things that have happened throughout time. But don't worry, you can rely on the law. Let him go. He'll have a fair trial like every individual does. Well, if that was the case, like I said before, George W. Bush, Tony Blair, war criminals, where's the justice there? Oh, of course, no answer. Thank you. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace.